Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Tutorials with Toneshifterz. As I promised, today I'm going to show you guys how I made my most recent kick. I'm going to show you the channel strip that I have and the project that I used to actually make that kick. Obviously, later down the line, I would have slowly tweaked and refined that kick. In the mixing process, EQing, and also tuning, because out of Drummers On, it wasn't directly on the note. But anyway, we'll get into that after. But let's jump straight into it. So basically, this is the project that I used to make that kick. And that's the kick from Scream and Shout, from Fuck Yeah, from my remix for Cruella, from my Mona Lisa remix. That's the main climax kick from those tracks. So this is the project file that I have. Well, actually, basically, these are just, all these channels are just like mucking around and experimenting. But this is the main channel strip that I had. And basically on its own, this is what the kick sounds like. So the whole idea behind kick building is that, you know, normally what we would do in the past is we would split the kick up into layers. You know, your main layers of the kick basically is the punch of the kick, which is the first half here. So if I open up Shaper Box, just so you can have a look. So if you see, this is the kick. And this part of the kick over here, the first part is the punch. That's what we consider to be the thud, the thing that hits, you know, like any kick. And then if you see what's afterwards, you know, this section here, that's what we call the tail. And these two parts need to work together. Normally, you would bounce it straight out of the synth with the kick and the tail together, but it's very hard to get something where they both sound good together. So most of the time, it's all about, you know, making a tail and then making some punches that actually fit the tail. In this case, it's just the one kick, and what I've done is I just did like this, used this volume shaper plugin by Shaperbox, and I just, so I don't hear the punch. All I want to hear is the tail. So when I'm working, that's what I want to hear. That's basically what I want to hear. Then I just grab one of my punches and then I layer it there on this channel. And I can tell if it's going to work. You know, I can be like, okay, that's going to work. That's going to work with something. And then I'll go ahead and I'll make, you know, some punches. I will layer some of the kicks that I've made before, and maybe with some new layers, and do that in a way that it works with the new tail. But let's go through the channel strip. I'm just going to open it up over here. As you can see here, I've used Destroyer, and I've also used Trash. Now, I've only used 2 distortions. A lot of people will use more. Some will use less. Some can. I mean, there's no real rule, you know. But the main idea behind it is you have 2 distortions, and in between those distortions is where you create your resi, really resi peaks. Now I'll go through each one by one, and I will show you how it all comes together. So this is the kick first. First of all, I'm using Drummers On, which is basically a 909 emulation. It's trying to sound like the Roland, and it's just a drum machine. So, you know, it's got everything from your snares, claps. And this is how all the hardstyle claps are made, basically. So that's the kick. So I'm gonna go to B here, just make another one, so you can see, you know, what changing the knobs do. So this is normally what it would sound like just straight off, you know, when you open the synth. Now, let me take it back to 8. As you can see, my one's got a little bit more punch to it, and the attack of the 909 is actually pitching down from high to low. It's going doo, doo, which is creating like a you know, when you distort that, you'll hear what I mean now. So let's go through and turn the distortion on. So that kind of sounds like a jump style kick, you know, it's just like a distorted 909. Very simple. Nothing too crazy. And then, you know, before the distortion, I put an EQ to cut the lows. And what that does is you'll find that when you cut the lows like this, you'd start to change the character of the kick. It starts to change how it sounds. In this case, I'm using a linear phase EQ because I didn't want it to change how it sounded. I only wanted it to get it a little bit cleaner or to fix it. So as you can hear, like, it's not changing the character too much. What it's doing is it's just making it a little bit cleaner. That's without it. You're getting a little bit of dissonance without it, you know. If you hear the difference, it still sounds okay, but then when you put this back on, now it's a real definite note, you know. It's whatever it's pitched to. Whereas before there was a little bit of like dissonance you were getting with the punch leading into the tail. But now it's a really solid note. So now we load up the Destroyer over here. Now this plugin, you know, when Cubase released Cubase 10, they had this Destroyer plugin, which was like a huge thing because, you know, we've been asking for it for so long, because it's basically an asymmetrical distortion, just like Logic has, and that's kind of what you need to pull off that hardstyle. Like, you don't need it, to be honest. We made all our kicks back in the day using trash, but if you want that particular sound that all the hardstyle guys have, they all use Logic, and they have the clip distortion. And what the clip distortion does is it creates this like this buzzing effect in the high end and also in the low end. It's like a brrr that you get, and it's very hard to pull that sound using trash. You know, we did it over the years, but with clip distortion, it's just so easy. You know, you can get that brrr straight away. It's quite simple. So as you can see, it's much more distorted now. So now if I open up this EQ and I put it in, you can see that now it's starting to take shape and form into the character of the actual kick. And what this takes me to the idea of how we used to build kicks back in the day. And we used to do everything separate. So we used to do the low end separate to the mid-range, which is the character of the kick, to the top end of the kick. Because we never had the clip distortion, it was very hard for us to pull this sound. So we would separate the kick into those three layers. And that's actually just for the tail, not for the punch. The punch is something separate. But in this case, now that we're using Destroyer, everything just comes out together as one almost, and it just works. Obviously, you can layer things together if you like. There's no real rule, but I'm just explaining to you the thought process of how we used to do things and how we do them now with the new Destroyer plugin. So if I go ahead and I mute, let me just double check what I'm using here. I'm just going to get rid of what I'm not using. That's also on. Everything else is on. Okay, cool. So if I go ahead and I turn everything off, I'll take you through the thought process of what we do when we're making kick. So now I'm like, okay, it's a little bit more distorted, a little bit more bass. Now I'm like, okay, now I need to pull some frequencies out because it's a little bit too intense before the distortion and it's not leaving any room for the character to come through. So now I'm going to create some room. I'm going to pull out some of the low mids here around 130 Hertz. Okay, it's pulled out some stuff, but now I want to create some more character. So I'm gonna push it around, you know, somewhere between 300 and 700 or 800 Hertz. This region you can push roughly anywhere, and you'll be able to pull some kind of character for the kick. So in this case, I would have done that. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting this character, this go, go, and it's kind of closing over, go, go. So then I want to kind of now try to get this to be a little bit cleaner, to be a little bit smoother so that it feels like one thing. So I'll try to pull some frequencies and add some frequencies until it feels right and it kind of melds together correctly. So we'll add some in now. Okay, pull some out here. Add a little bit more back. I mean, to be honest, I could probably just mute these because they're kind of cancelling each other out, but there is a slight difference. It's very subtle. Okay. Turn that one on. Now there's a little bit too much character, so I'm thinking like, okay, maybe I need to put in some more lows, some more bass to even out that that distortion. So if I bring in the slow lay here, that's good, but now there's a little bit too much low, so maybe I need to pull a little bit out, like just 1 dB or 1.5 dB. So I will bring this one back in to pull that low end down. And that basically takes you to the layer that we have. That's the basic character now of the kick. So after that, I've added another EQ. And, you know, it's all about trial and error and trying things and doing things in a different way. In this case, I already have my character, but I was like, what if I just add more? What happens? Then you get this like, even more like this rolling thing. And what I've done in particular here, I've automated the gain of this frequency band, which is at roughly 487 Hertz. So if I delete this, you can hear the difference. Now I'm creating this like movement in the kick, do, 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 and that's kind of back in the day, we used to have our kicks super clean and there was no movements. We used to hate doing the movements in the kick. But slowly as time has progressed, we've found that the kicks have evolved and that the kicks have now, they're getting like harder, rougher, and we're using distortion even more creatively now. And you find a lot of those kicks have like this tail at the end, which it's like do wet, do wet, do wet. It's got this like extra distortion bit on the end. So what I've done to kind of recreate that sound is I've automated the gain in this particular region to boost up. And you can see I've done that with the automation here. And you can see how this band will push up. So if I play, if I bring that gain down, you can see what happens. It starts to be more like bow, bow, bow instead of bow, 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 bow. And I kind of like that bow, bow, bow kind of vibe for the kick. Especially for today, it's very like a modern sounding hardstyle kick. You can keep experimenting with this. Like, to be honest, I can keep adding some band. And that's already going to be pretty fucking cool. That's going to be like maybe a really raw kind of kick. This is actually a pretty cool character itself as well. Not much low end, but what you would do, you would make another layer and take the low end from that one, cut the low end from this one, and meld them together. And then you would have a much fuller kick. And it's all about having that balance. So I'll remove these layers anyway, because this is about how I made this. So that's those two EQs before and after those two distortions. Now, you know, I'm just using trash before because I just wanted that, just a simple distortion. Then for the next one, I had the destroyer because I wanted that clip distortion, that brrr, that buzzing kind of distortion. And that's the type of distortion that you need to get that. But I mean, if that's not the, I mean, with all the raw style kicks, to be honest, you don't need to use a destroyer to do that. You don't need an asymmetrical distortion. You just, you know, it's all to do with resi peaks, and it's a lot of sub-ND kicks, not much character. Depends on which artist as well that you're listening to or that you're checking out. Like if you check some of Subsonic's kicks or some of the Sub-Zero project kicks, they can be quite, you know, full like this, like with the characters, but then you've got a lot of guys that have, you know, the character of their kick is not in the tail, actually, it's the punch, you know, doing peep kicks, people doing melodies with the kicks these days. So it's all trial and error and trying some things. And yeah, I mean, if you want that particular sound, then you don't need to use destroyer. But if you want this buzzing, brrring kind of sound, then you would go for the destroyer. Then after that, I would just do some kind of EQing to balance the kick out. So as you can see, it's quite mid-rangey, not much high end, and it's lacking a little bit of lows. So then I would boost some of the lows, take out some of that low mid, and then, you know, high shelf, bring up some of those highs so you get some crispness. That's with, that's without. And then here I would have done some match EQing to a reference kick that I would have had. Maybe something from Noise Controllers, or maybe something from Headhunters, or from The Pitcher, or from Zani from back in the day, depending on what you're referencing your kick back to. I don't remember what I referenced this one to. I don't really have the web file again. But that's what it sounds like with the match. If that's without the match EQ. And then if I turn the match EQ on, now it's kind of in line with how it should fit in the mix, you know? And this is just a rough guide. Once you start to actually put the kick in your actual track, then you'll start to actually tweak the kick even more. Then you'll start to realize, hey, this is maybe a little bit too bright for the track, so I might just high shelf the tail, keep the punch the same. So now that we're kind of happy with this tail, we're like, okay, this is kind of roughly the direction that we're gonna go. Then I would add like a shaper box on there. So then I no longer hear the punch, and then I put like a modern attack of mine, something that I have. I'm like, okay, that kind of works. So then I could go ahead, bounce this tail, and then, you know, put some of the punches that I have on there. That's basically how you make the tail of the kick. There's not much to it, to be honest. It's just about trial and error. It's about mucking around with the EQ in between those two distortions, and then trying to get the sound clean and at the same time with the right character that's going to work for you. The next step after this is making a punch. And back in the day, we used to make the punches from scratch, and then we would layer some samples, like just some clubby kicks that we had for the low end, and we would layer some punches that we've made throughout the years. I mean, these days, I have such a huge collection of my kicks over the years that I don't really need to go and make those layers anymore. I can just grab those kick layers that I already have and layer them together in a way, something for the sub, something for the punch, something for in between. And sometimes my punch, you know, I have like 10 different layers all doing different things. And that's basically how I make my punches these days. I can do something for you now just to show you how it kind of works. But what we'll do in the past is basically, I will duplicate this channel so we don't lose the settings on this one. And I'm going to go into Drummers On right now, and I'm gonna turn off that shaper box, and I'm gonna get rid of the tail completely. So now I'm just getting this punch. So this could be a cool punch itself. You could work with something like this. So what I would do, I would just have like a channel here, create an audio track, and then, you know, and I will just record a bunch of things in. So that's one. And then I would just muck around with it even more. You know, I would go here and I would make a new. This was something I was already mucking around with before, but it's already giving a different character to the punch. So I'll just record that in as well. On this channel. So that's that punch. Then I would let's see if I can make this kick a little bit. Something like that, maybe, or I could just get rid of everything, start from scratch. Something like that could be nice for like the low end, the thud, you know, like the 80 hertz punch. So I'll just record it in, record that in, move it along. Something like maybe like that. Then I could also record that in. And then what you do, you end up building a whole bunch of these punches. And once you build a whole bunch of these punches, then you can go and layer them all together. And sometimes you might have something that's really cool, or that something that stands out. And then because it's all about experimenting and trying some stuff. And you know, maybe you put some reverb on it. So let's just grab like, let's just chuck a red line reverb on there for now. I might change the symmetry of the distortion. Open up the tone here. I might take off this match EQ because and go back here. Could also export something like this. Move that along. I mean, this is more like a raw style punch, to be honest. So you can see it's just trial and error and getting different kind of sounds. And then I would record that in. So we've got a multitude of exports over here right now. And what I would do, I would go and then I would start to meld them into a kick. So if I was to put this back into the stereo output, so if we listen to them one by one, 1 to 4. Okay, do the same. That's like a Pete kick. That's just a punch, like a low one. I like this one. And then also, let's check this one. Alright, so these are the two kind of raw ones, and then we've got these ones which are more subtle. So if we take, say, this one. So let's take that one to start off with. So what we'll do now, we would start to layer this. I would duplicate the track. I would sometimes pitch this up like 12. Cool. And then I will duplicate this track again, maybe grab something from here. But I don't really want the tail of that. You can hear the tail coming through a little bit. I'm gonna put this to like 32. If I phase invert it, move it around. Okay, duplicate that channel. Okay, we don't need all of these. What else do we have? Let's layer in this one. So these are kind of hot in the mix, so I'm going to Q link and turn them down. So normally this process will take some time, and you would sit there and you would layer things and make it come together. Eventually what I would do, I would start to layer in some of the layers of my own kicks that I've done in the past. And, you know, then you can start to maybe just gotta mute some layers, test some things, get things in and out of phase, EQ them differently, distort some things. Process is the same way of making the actual kick, but actually it's you're just doing it the same way, but for the punch. So once I would be happy with that, then I would go to my tail. I would say, okay. I would then export my tail, render in place. Obviously, I would automate the shaper box to stop working there, but just for now, it's fine. And then I would see how it fits with the kick. So I probably need to turn down So maybe I need to EQ that punch a little bit differently. Somewhere around there. pitch them differently. There's a little transpose function here in Cubase up at the top. So what if I wanted to use like more peepy kind of kick? So if I do this, I can hear like a rumbling in the low end. So I kind of want to clean that, and I think that's with the peep thing. And you can see it's the high frequencies shut off there, and then you just get the low, that kind of thud. You kind of don't want that. You want everything to be as smooth as possible. But I do like the reverb, so what I might do is just shift everything over, and to do that I have to cut the end off. Then I'll crossfade them, get them melded nicely. And then maybe I'm thinking, okay, maybe this peep kick is like a little bit out of key. So what if I want to get it in key? So I'll go up one semitone. I mean, that's the same key, but you could also do it in the same scale if it's in a minor or a major, whatever, but it doesn't really matter. This kind of works. This isn't wrong to say, but it also depends on the vibe of the track. But I like to have things harmonic. That's just how I am. So maybe now this doesn't work with this layer. So then I might mute this layer out again. So now I'm kind of getting happy with the character of that punch, and maybe I think it needs something that slaps a little bit more. So if I chuck in this punch, it's just one of my kicks that I've made earlier. That's kind of cool. So then I could bounce this kick. What I would do actually, I would go back in here and automate the shaper box. I would take the shaper box off, unmute it, and bounce it again. So then I have the full tail there, and I can do the fade as I like it. So it's kind of the same thing, but I'm doing it manually now. So I'm kind of happy with that. I mean, I would process this even further, but just for the sake of this demonstration, so you guys can get a rough idea of how I work, how I do the kicks, and how you guys can also do the kicks, and also a little bit of the thought process behind it, because that's actually what's important. Because if you understand why I'm doing certain things and why I'm muting certain things, or why I'm moving things out of phase or back into phase, then you know, okay, that's the kind of similar approach that I need to have as well. So I say I'm happy now with this punch, this kick, sorry. I would export this, and I would assess the kick as a waveform. And normally what you want, you know, you want your punch to you don't want them to be, you know, one too loud or one too soft. And you kind of want your kick to look like a fish, if that makes sense. So if I was to actually do this myself, if I cut it on the 0 there, let me normalize this kick. So then that kind of looks like a normal kick, you know. I would kind of draw it in myself. Some people like to compress, but sometimes just drawing it in is much easier. And this is kind of what I mean by the fish. This is the body of the fish, and normally where the eyes, here the eyes would be, and this is kind of the tail, and that's what I mean by the fish, and that's how the kick should look. But also reference to your ears and see, okay, how does it sound? Is it too much? Maybe it was fine the way it was. Personally, I think this sounds better. It's still got that fish formation. You can see over here the punch is, you can see it's been clipped quite a bit from the top here, and then the volume slowly attenuates, and then the tail should come up and then slowly drift down. These are they're not rules set in stone. You can, of course, kicks can be squashed. Like I can run this through, let's say, an inflator, which is basically just a limiter. I could export that. And then you'll see that it's just like one big sausage kick, which is fine. It's not gonna sound wrong or anything, but you might lose some of the dynamics. You might lose some of the buzziness of the tail that you were trying to get with the Destroyer. But yeah, it's just, these are some rules that we always used to do ourselves. The kick used to always look a particular way, also because it's made it sound a particular way. But I mean, this day and age, things are changing, times are changing. The genre is evolving, and yeah, I mean, you can, if it feels right and it sounds good, just go with it. Don't really, think too much about it. But if you wanted to see how it pitches, then normally I would do like a pitch test, and then I'll say, okay, let's see how the kick pitches. So let's chop it about there. I'm gonna pitch this, I don't know, 6 semitones up with some time correction, always on the solo musical algorithm, just because that's the best algorithm for pitching hardstyle kicks. And then I'm gonna have a listen. So not bad. Go back. And then I would also load it up into Nimble and see how it works in there. So then it needs time to process. Pitches quite well. And that's basically it. Then I would start to import that into my tracks, and after that, I would import that into import it into the track. And then, I would start to muck around with that and see how it fits in the mix, and if I need to add anything or adjust anything. And yeah, it's always a work in progress. It's always evolving and changing and melding it to fit the track. And once you get the kick right, after, those few times of working it in the track, then you would export it, and that would be your kick. And that kick would be done. And then you could move on to something new, like a brand new one, using the same channel strip, but changing a few parameters. And then all of a sudden you have a new tail, because you moved the frequency from 556 hertz to 400 hertz. And all of a sudden the kick sounds completely different. Or you put an EQ before the distortion and you cut some of those lows out with with just a low cut up to say 20 or 30 hertz. And then you have a new sounding kick. And that's the beauty of it, because there's no real rule, but it's more about trial and error. So, I mean, I hope that's kind of given you some insight into how I actually make my kicks, how I do them, and I hope it helps you in your journey in making kick drums, because, I mean, over the years we had a lot of tough times making kicks, especially without using the clip distortion, or in this case, the Destroyer, and You know, we were using plugins like Camel Fat and Trash and stuff to make those kicks, and you know, splitting the layers, it was a really big process. And you can still do that now. Sometimes I still do that with Destroyer if I want to do something different, but most of the time now it all comes out in one go, and that's basically the kick with some, you know, EQing and tweaking later once I put it into the track. But yeah, if there's anything else you guys want me to do or show, let me know. I'll be more than happy to share some more knowledge with you guys. Take it easy, and happy producing. Peace.